Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 182 of Sports Management Podcast. Today's guest is Ben Nichols, a media relations professional with experience from WADA, Formula 1, ATP, and the Commonwealth Games Federation. In 2022, Ben started padel-dedicated, a global padel-dedicated communications consultancy, and in 2024, he continued to start companies within the padel sector. We spoke about Ben's background, why he started padel-dedicated, finding gaps in the market, KH91, Club Águilas, and his other ventures, what the future holds, and much more. Ben Nichols, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Marcus, good to see you again, and a pleasure to join you.
It's great to have you back on the show. You are the only person who's been here now 3 times, and I'm really excited about it. I bring guests back when I think, there is a new perspective or something new to bring on, and you have been doing a lot of things lately that is really interesting. So, but first, just to give, if someone hasn't checked in on the previous episode, just a quick background of who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I feel awful being on for a 3rd time, but thank you for explaining there is a good reason, because we have some new things to talk about, which won't be repetitive. So, it's an absolute, privilege to join again. I'm a big fan of your podcast. I'm Ben Nichols. I'm founder of padel-dedicated, which is the world's leading communications and marketing company for the sport of padel. And my background is 20 years in sports PR, the promotional side of sport with media relations, strategy, stakeholder relations, and all kind of communications within the sports industry. I've worked in Formula 1. I've worked in tennis as press officer at the Dubai Tennis Championships for a few years. I worked on a very different front for the World Anti-Doping Agency as head of media relations, looking after media for the Russian doping scandal. And I also was director of communications for the Commonwealth Games. So I've done a variety of different things been lucky to work in different countries. And a couple of years ago, I discovered the professional industry side of padel, and having played it a few times before, and thought there was a great opportunity as companies started to arrive in my home market, the UK, and internationally, to focus on the storytelling side of the sport. So I set up padel-dedicated as a kind of storyteller for the sport and for the businesses getting involved.
That's really interesting. So what was it about padel that caught your interest the first time, that so much so that you wanted to, create a company and work in this full time?
Yeah, I think I grew up as a tennis and squash player to a high level as a junior. And so I always had racket sports in my background, and I'd worked a little bit in racket sports. I'd worked in tennis for some years. I played padel probably the first time, I want to say around 2019 in Dubai, and quickly saw the appeal of it being a bit of a cross between squash and tennis. So naturally, I was able to pick it up quite quickly. And what made me want to work in it was, I think, I was doing a contract for the LTA, who are the Tennis Federation in the UK, and also one of those federations that also manage padel. And part of my remit, I had a 3-month contract in the autumn of 2022. Part of my contract was to look after PR for the British padel team, who were competing at the World Championships in Dubai. And I quickly realized a few things, really. Number one, what am I going to do next after my contract? So a very practical need. What's my next step in my career? And number two, I found the sport fascinating from a kind of playing point of view, and perhaps even more fascinating from a business point of view, in that I was meeting a lot of people outside of my job who were investing in padel, building clubs, building courts, getting excited about it, reading the media around this sport. So there's a lot of hype. And I just thought, well, actually, I want to work in this sport. And what's my entry point? Well, let's use kind of my experience and what I've done for 20 years, because I didn't see anyone doing it. So there was no sports marketing agencies focused on padel, not only in the UK, but internationally, from what I could see, certainly outside of Spain. So the obvious thing was to set up my own. And so padel-dedicated was born. And the aim of it was to, when I say promote brand padel, promote the sport, but no one pays us to promote the sport. But the way to do that was obviously work with businesses and get them on the map, so to speak, to get them better known, to build their profiles so that they could succeed commercially, obviously, and succeed in their own worlds. So yeah, the aim was to grow the profile of the sport, get it better known, and work with everyone from clubs, and I'll be honest, clubs have been the bulk of the clients, conferences, players, the professional side, so tournaments, leagues, competitions. Then there's, of course, court manufacturers. There's clothing and racket brands. So there's a whole different, sector of different sectors of companies within the sport itself. And I thought there was a great opportunity to do this, and I thought I was perfectly positioned to do it myself. So that's why Padel 22 was created.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned the storytelling piece. So Padel is really fun to play. A lot of people play it. If I take Sweden as an example, at one point during COVID, I felt like everyone was playing Padel. Maybe not so many people were watching it, like on TV or going to games. So do you think that this, the storytelling and your job to promote the sport more will help result in more people actually, becoming fans and watching it more than just playing it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I think the immediate appeal of padel is the playing side, the recreational side. When people in the UK, in the US, where I work a lot, emerging in Sweden, I'm sure, when they're talking in padel context, they're not so much talking about the professional players and who's won which tournament. They're talking about getting on court, quickly picking it up, loving it, socializing with their friends, having fun, smiling, all this stuff. So seeing it as a lifestyle, I suppose, and a sport to play, to a way of exercising. That's what people are talking about padel. Those are the terms they're talking about padel within. However, as a sport progresses and as it becomes more mature, I think naturally people that become obsessed with playing it will turn their attention to, okay, how do the pros do it? So these days they'll turn on YouTube, not just television. They'll turn on YouTube or Instagram and look at kind of the pros doing it. And then they start to get to know who those pros are and who are the names behind them. And then they start to follow the tours, the competitions. And then, so it's one step after another. And I think eventually then they start to, follow the circuit a little bit. So I don't get worried that people are not talking about, the number 1 and 2 padel players in the world and recognizing their names. I think it is just a natural market evolution. And this will, over time, people will know who LeBron or Galan or, Coelho are. And, it's not a worry. It's not happening now. I think the way we've got to sell padel is what a great sport to go and play. And then from that, people, naturally want to improve their games. They watch others and they look at the pros. So that will happen over time. It's not going to happen overnight. That said, we need to do everything we can to promote these players and promote that side of the sport, because it is a business. There's the commercial appeal. There's the attractiveness of going to watch it. And I think it's a great sport to watch in the flesh, in person. I think television, it's still got a way to go to present itself. If I look at a sport like squash, it doesn't do a great job on TV. It's great to watch in person. It's great to play in person. And I would say similar with padel. It's great to play. We can agree that. I think it's great to watch physically. I think on TV, I think there's a way to go. It doesn't instantly grab everyone. So, look, I think people are going to become more familiar with the pros. I think things are going to help. Like if a big professional tournament came to London, that's going to be and I think it's ready for it, to be honest. I think that would help a lot with the sport's visibility and the players as brands. And then, of course, other steps like, when does it become in the Olympics? That's when it will reach huge numbers of people from the kind of professional, non-playing fan perspective. So yeah, it's going to happen, and we've got to be patient on that side. But we can still be proactive in trying to elevate the brand of players.
Definitely. So you mentioned that, when you started, there was nothing outside of Spain that was similar. And obviously it's a global company now. You're working in different countries. So from your perspective, do you see different challenges in different parts of Europe versus US and UK? Or what are some different challenges?
Yeah, I think there are. I think I use the US as my comparison to working with the UK or markets in Europe. And I think the challenge you'll have with something like the US is it's distinct in that pickleball has been the sport that's grabbed people's attention for a long time now. Well, a long time, it's relative in last 4 or 5 years, let's say. So paddle's journey there is being put in comparison to like, okay, what is this other racket sport, which is quite new, but very popular now. The challenge in the US is it's such a big country. It's got such a deep, enriched kind of sporting culture with the major leagues. So any sport to break through, actually, as pickleball has to do a hell of a job in terms of, the way it markets itself, the way it appeals to people. Paddle's got to come along now, and I don't see paddle and pickleball competing, but actually, to an extent, it's got to compete for eyeballs. It's got to compete for land and real estate. Why would people build paddle if they can build pickleball more cheaply? But I think we're now starting to see the US adopt, paddle as a sport, certainly on the coasts and in the more cosmopolitan international areas, and actually in the states in between. And people are very strategic in that even if they want to build just paddle clubs, they'll build pickleball alongside as an entry to get people through. So it's people doing it in clever ways. That's the challenge in the US is you're not just bringing paddle, to sort of bring it alongside tennis. You've got this other sport that's 4 or 5 years, haven't grown in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's a different challenge to other markets like Europe and the UK, where actually paddle is coming along as the new kid on the block. And the only context we're seeing it in from a racket sport is alongside tennis, really. I think the challenge with paddle and tennis is actually, people talk about this threat to tennis. I don't think it's that simple. I think you're going to have actually young people who get into paddle who maybe have never played tennis or don't play tennis. And actually, if they have tennis courts alongside, will start to play tennis because they'll see, okay, well, I've kind of want something new and interesting, and it's a more difficult game to play. So maybe they migrate to tennis as well. I don't think it's going to be one-way traffic of people going tennis to paddle. So I think the idea that paddle is a threat to tennis, I don't think it's that black or white. I think if tennis clubs who are struggling are actually going to succeed long term, they need to think about building paddle courts alongside and seeing both these sports coexisting and people moving from one to the other in both directions. So I see different challenges in different markets. In terms of how I promote the sport, look, I think the big challenge is how do you compete with football or soccer? Some would say, how do you compete? I'm sure in Scandinavia with hockey. How do you compete with some of the British sports here, cricket, rugby, that are very culturally entrenched. So I come back to, it's about presenting what a sport it's like to play, and the appeal that way, and then the other bits will follow.
Yeah, I think because for paddle, what it has going for it is the barrier to entry is so small. You can start right away, and you see that in paddle courses from small kids to senior adults that can play, and on different levels, obviously, but everyone can play and have fun. So I think that's something that really has going for it. Then, I mean, as we talked about before, getting it more televised, getting it on TV, because that's how many people, they watch something on TV and it looks cool and they want to do that as well, or YouTube or Instagram, as you mentioned.
Exactly. And actually with the younger generations, perhaps that's a point we've not mentioned, is actually, if they're seeing something show on their Instagram feed, or TikTok, maybe it is for others, that's immediately going to get their curiosity, and they're going to think, oh, what is this thing? And then they start to dig a bit deeper. And then obviously, we do things when we see it from several touch points. And then if they see a paddle court physically near them, that will resonate. Or if they read something somewhere else, or they hear a celebrity talk about it, so it's actually getting it's getting paddle ubiquitous, right? So it's getting it out there in many different ways that suddenly get someone to react and be like, okay, I'm going to go and play it now. So for sure, it's multifaceted how we can grow the sport.
Definitely. Do you think it needs to have like an influencer, like Beckham was doing a lot for pickleball and so forth? Do you think that will bring a boost, or is it more, for show?
No, look, I mean, it helps massively. It helps. Like, people, they see someone that they respect or admire or is a hero to them. They see them play it, and absolutely, it will get them thinking, well, if they do it, I want to do it. So people are very, we're like sheep in many ways. We follow trends and celebrities and do things that they do because, that's cool or whatever. And absolutely, it has a relevance. So, and I think, when they get on court for the first time, then it's pretty quickly sold. They play once. I'm still yet to find many people that don't enjoy it, at least to some extent. So For sure. Getting a celebrity that you follow or that plays it, endorsing the sport is absolutely brilliant, and is a big, obviously, part of what we're trying to do is, find who are those celebrities that are playing and how can we work with them to help grow the sport and get more people on court.
So I know you have done or worked along very interesting companies and projects lately. So are there any examples like case studies or examples that you can share?
How long have we got?
We got time.
So I'll give you a bit of an overview of what I've set up this year, and the timing of these things is not. It wasn't intentional to launch several things in quick succession, but that's the way they landed. So alongside Paddle 22, I've set up a few businesses. One is called Cage 91. You can see I enjoy the name and number. But look, I thought, look, we work with some good media companies in the paddle sector, but I saw a gap in the market to set up basically what will become a full multimedia company for the off-court side of paddle, the business, the entrepreneurship, the lifestyle, the people kind of shaping this industry. I thought there's so many interesting stories. So I wanted to create, a digital version of a glossy magazine, and it's a work in progress, but we've got some great interviewees, some great content and stories to tell. And it's to focus on the emerging markets. So it's people from everywhere from, okay, Sweden might have emerged already, but Sweden, it could be Germany, France, the UK, US, South Africa, all of these places that are now adopting paddle. And who are these people behind the sport, creating the industry? Because they all come pretty much from outside of paddles. So there's some fascinating stories and case studies. We wanted to tell the stories of these. And ultimately, the aim there is, to tell stories, but actually to connect people. We've had some great examples in the first couple of weeks of people reading something, contacting us because they wanted to be connected with the person or brand that's on the site. So it's a great kind of facilitator and connector as well. So we've got set up that multimedia company, Cage 91. I've also set up a property and paddle business called Property Plus Paddle, which is essentially a community networking platform for people in the real estate and property industries who want to do a couple of things, who either are intrigued by paddle and want to learn more about the sport and the opportunity it presents them from a business point of view to build paddle facilities, or it's actually the corporate networking side. So it's getting property, real estate people on court, playing this sport, seeing it as this kind of new golf where they can meet like-minded professionals and have a really good kind of corporate networking experience. So we had one event in Padium in London in October. We had, an aim of 60 people. We had close to 200 registered, which is great. We've got our second property and paddle in New Jersey in the US next month in January. And then we've been asked to do 2 more in the US next year, 1 in Canada and 2 or 3 in the UK. And there's others. So we quickly realized we're onto something with this kind of property and paddle merchants community network. And we want to grow that. So I think that's that's another business I've set up. It's a great opportunity there. And then Club Águilas, which is something very different, where with Joey Middleton, my business partner, who's set up Pulco Studios, the clothing company. We saw an opportunity to paddles being positioned to some in the high net worth and kind of audience as a very kind of elite high-end sport. You can go and play at the best clubs, the best resorts worldwide. And we wanted to create this kind of Michelin guide of paddle where people can go and experience, review the best clubs and resorts and find out where they are and use Club Águilas as a trusted resource of knowing, a bit like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith or a Michelin, they've read that, they trust it, and they'll go and book their trip. From a business point of view, for the clubs and resorts, we want them to aspire to be on here. And we have a kind of, again, a similar to Michelin guide, Michelin star concept called the Eagle's Wings. And we have a team of reviewers who decide what goes on our site. We've had 15 initial clubs and resorts, everything from Brisas in the US to the St. Regis Red Sea Resort in Saudi Arabia, Nihi in Indonesia, Nueva Alcantara Club, which is one of the established ones, but beautiful lifestyle club in Malaga. And yeah, we want these guys to really kind of want to aspire to achieve their wings to get their Michelin star of paddle, so that they're thought of in the right way, and have, the right kind of clientele visiting for them. So it's very much to create an exclusive club of clubs. And yeah, we're really excited about where we can take that.
Well, that's you're really finding you mentioned gaps in the market, and you started working in the paddle, and then okay, infrastructure is an important part, and then you have the property paddle,
Yeah.
also with the Cage 91, and now with Club Águilas. I mean, like paddle travel is also like that's a big part of it. Specifically, if you live in countries like you and I, where the weather is not great, you can to do two things at once. Maybe go to Spain and go to a great paddle resort as well.
For sure. Look, there's a market for it, which is why we created. We thought there's people, a bit like tennis and tourism has had over the years. People go to La Manga in Spain, or exotic locations because they want to have good weather, a relaxing time, but they want to play tennis. Paddle that's happening in paddle, and it's happening informally. And we thought, actually, in time there will be a need for people to be like, okay, I know maybe the countries I want to go to, but actually I need to always decide my holiday by paddle paddle resorts or clubs. And that's what we wanted to create. So we think there's a great kind of growing paddle tourism industry. There are people out there who have the time and the disposable income to go and take these holidays, but they maybe don't know where to get their information. So if we can pull it together under one roof, and it's very selected, you can't kind of buy your way in. You might have invested a lot of money in a facility, but it's got to be, kind of Club Águilas worthy, I suppose, in terms of it being what our team of reviewers think is the right fit. And yeah, then it becomes something, somewhere you want to go and visit, and it becomes a site that you want to appear on if you're a club or a resort owner. So paddle tourism is growing. And I think we're going to see that in many countries. We're going to see exclusive resorts in the likes of the US. Certainly, we'll see many in Asia. South Africa is, growing as one of these destinations. Australia. So a lot of these kind of far away places from you and I in Europe are going to be destinations for paddle holidays, and we're excited to bring that to more people.
So do you have like a checklist of things that they need to live up to in order to be in Club Águilas?
Yeah, we're not going to advertise the exact checklist of what it is. There's areas where, it's got to be kind of Águilas worthy. So everything from what's the coaching like, what's the feel like when you're there, what's the food and beverage offering. We have a cocktail of the club. So, there's got to be a good cocktail there. What's the community like? How does it nurture a community, get more people on court? How successful is it from that perspective? What's the physical look and feel like in the brand? Does it look good when you're there? So yes, there's absolutely areas that get assessed, but it's not a strict X out of 10, 8 or 9 out of 10 means it gets in. It's, yes, there's kind of a, assessment, but it's also always going to be a feel. So like I said, there'll be clubs out there that spend a huge amount of money creating what they think is the perfect paddle club. But if it's missing some ingredients, we feel it just doesn't have that kind of je ne sais quoi, that kind of feel which you get when you go to these places, then it might not immediately make it onto there. So I think it's, yes, there's areas that are going to be assessed, but it's not a totally quantitative exercise. It is, it's about the feel as well as the kind of, the more statistical as well.
I understand. So the name Club Águilas, I guess it's Spanish. I don't know what it means. Is it a place? Does it mean something? Where does it come from?
Yeah, Eagles. So Club of Eagles. And it's also kind of, Mexican, a Mexican symbol is the eagle as well. And with paddle's heritage in Mexico, we thought it was a nice nod to the heritage of the sport. And yeah, the eagle's wings is our system for, having a Michelin star. And like I said, we've had 15 or 16 clubs and resorts that have made it so far in our first drop. And then we've got coming up, depending on when this is coming out, you'll see that we've got coming up in January, some new clubs and resorts that will make it on. So we're going to, keep people guessing of what's to come. We want to make sure it's super international. We feel that people should have the option to see what's going on in every part of the world. And that will become a really fun exercise, I think, to see what's out there, to see what's different. And I think the key with Club Águilas is everything's individual. So there are operators who will create multiple clubs, but it might be one of their clubs features on there, but the other doesn't, and that will just come down to very kind of specific, nuanced reasons. So we want it to be anti same, we call it. So everything feels like a one-off, feels very independent, and feels authentic.
And then I know also that you have worked with the Anglo-American Padel Cup.
Correct.
What is that?
So that's the final bit of the jigsaw for this year, and that's then I've got enough on my plate, I think. But look, I saw again with a business partner in the US who I've got to know, a guy called Bill Ullman, who is on the board of the US Padel Association. He's become a friend in the industry. He's a squash guy, as lots of people in the northeast of the US are, and he's converted to padel. And he spoke to me earlier this year and thought there was a good opportunity he used to live in the UK, knows a lot about the UK-US relationship and the kind of sporting history there, and thought there was an option to have Great Britain against United States padel competition. And I agreed, and I thought, what a great idea, because both of these countries are at the beginning of their journey. So we're not creating this, very kind of imbalanced competition. And I thought there was a great story there. And obviously, I'm always thinking of what's the narrative and story behind this. And I thought, if you go back in history, the America's Cup sailing, the Davis Cup tennis, Ryder Cup, it all started as Britain, America. They've obviously evolved, but that was the history. What a great opportunity to create a clever bit of history, but with a new twist, right? So it's these like very kind of history countries with a great sporting rivalry, but who are new kids on the block. So we thought there's a nice twist, an ironic twist there to create, this story, but in padel. So yes, it's that. It's Britain against America in padel. It's in New York in May, a Padel House in May 2025. And then it will be alternate years. So 2026, we go to London, and then we'll go back and back and back. So so look, it could be different locations in both countries, but the idea is it's going to be different categories. So we have 60s age group, 50s, 40s, and open. So open being the best players we can get from under 40s. And 4 players in each category, men and women. And we have an overall winner, America or Britain. And everyone's obviously competing for their pair, for their age group, but everyone wants to contribute, a bit like the Ryder Cup for the overall prize. And our aim is to get the best players we can find in both countries. We've got some captains appointed, and they are appointing their own teams of 4 people. And we're lucky. We've got some of the best ranked players in both countries. I can tell you on the British side, we've got the top players in the open category. And this is the start of it. We think we've got a great story here. We think in time this could become something very big. In time, we want to get the attention of the federations, because this could be something great for them to endorse, the national federations. But I think right now, it's startup, so we're looking at sponsorships and partners, trying to find people that believe in this competition and journey, and create a great event over 2 days in May in New York. Look, it's a private setup. There's not ranking points yet, but we think in future we want to make it sanctioned and a very big part of the padel calendar.
No, I think this is a great idea. And as you said, also from the storytelling point of view, and also, US is a huge market, and they love this type of things when it comes to, being patriotic and supporting your country and competing. So I think this is great.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. And look, we have ambitions as well to create a student category. I know in the UK, the university system for padel has very much begun in the last 6 months. In the US, it's a bit behind, but I'm sure in a year, 2 years' time, we'll see similar, a national university framework. So maybe that becomes a category as well. So I think we've got a great destination. We're the early stage now, and we think it's a really exciting addition to the padel calendar.
For sure. So we are closing out 2024 here, and you have been busy, to say the least. So, having Padel 22 and then Club Águilas, probably plus Padel, K91 and all this, how how do you manage your time? How do you making it work? It's several companies with different, angles into paddle. So how are you structuring all of this to make it work?
Biggest challenge, as anyone would say, is time, and also working, figuring out the right team to make things advance and to execute on the ideas. I have to be very strict with kind of my time planning for the week. Paddle 22 is the day job. That's what's most established. That's continues to be the number one priority in growing that. But I have to kind of, from a very practical point of view, compartmentalize my week, put certain time to these different projects, we're assembling teams around these different businesses so that we can find people who are passionate about them, who want to help us progress them. So, at the beginning, it becomes, who are the teams we can put to this to make sure they progress? How do we monetize them as well, sponsorship, etc. And obviously with that comes the opportunity to scale them and bring on team members and stuff. So it becomes you're constantly learning from it. And there'll be times when you're putting more time to one business and then you need to step away because you've neglected another area. So you've got to constantly juggle. Unfortunately, we can't clone ourselves yet. So we have to find ways to I'm as impatient as the next entrepreneur, and that I want to progress these things quickly, but in the right way. But you have to be realistic. So doing these right doesn't come overnight. It means, looking at it for the long term. So look, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's about just trying to be structured, systematic, find team members who can add value, and trying to get the most impact, I guess, for the least time and resource possible. So what are the things that are going to carry this further? What are the things that are distraction or maybe a waste of time? And really picking the right things, the right use of time and resource to make progress.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. It makes perfect sense. And, creating a great team, as you said, so you'll be able to maybe take one step away from some tasks and have a great team that handling that, so you can oversee the other companies as well.
Exactly. And I hope we'll see you in maybe Club Águilas reviews soon, Marcus, and on the
yeah, for sure. That was 2024. We are 2 weeks, something away from 2025. So what does the future look like for Ben Nichols and Padel 22 and all the other adventures?
I think 2024 has very much been building these new businesses year. 2025, I don't want to say there won't be new ideas that come up, but it's about consolidating, growing them, and really, continuing to advance our ability to work in different countries with Padel 22. I think it's about big growth in the US, big growth in the UK from our business point of view. I think as well, it's about starting to work in some new markets we've not worked in, particularly Australia. I'd like to be starting to work in some of the GCC countries. I'd like to be doing some more work in. So I think it's, starting to operate in different markets and have the right team members on the ground who can help us work with clients there. That's from Padel 22. And I think the other businesses, I think it's continuing to grow their visibility. Anglo-American, it is about executing a great first event. So it's stability and it's growth. And it's, I think, keeping focused on what we're doing well and doubling down on that.
Sounds good. Now you mentioned, expanding into Australia, and also how is the Arab world when it comes to paddle? I know you have lived in Dubai for a couple of years, so and they obviously have the funds if they want to, invest in something. So how has the interest been in that area of the world?
Look, I think purely from the sport of paddle, I think it's somewhere like the UAE. Some people are saying, it's plateauing. They're noticing what happened in Sweden. Then they're not by any means saying that's happened there, but they're saying it's not continuing at the same growth rate. I think it's reached its level of enough clubs for the population of paddle players. So that's interesting in that, we get excited about the hype, but actually we need to also look at, okay, is the market there mature enough? And just how do we make it run well? And how do we promote paddle there well? without needing to create too many more places for people to play. Otherwise, we get a demand and supply issue. So I would say it's one to watch in terms of, will it stagnate, the market there? Has it reached its saturation point? From an ambition point of view, look, there's nowhere in the world more ambitious with big projects, with great ideas, with wanting to get the best international stars there. I'm sure we're going to see more professional paddle competitions there. I'm sure we're going to see more academies and sort of centers of excellence, because I think they're ambitious. They want to bring the world's best there. The GCC countries do a very good job of, they want to be on the international map. So I think we're going to see more of those type of entities, maybe fewer clubs getting built because of the reasons I just mentioned. So look, there's growth in different ways. There's growth of facilities to play, but there's also growth of other sectors within paddle. So I think we're going to see the latter.
Yeah, it's interesting to follow. Anything else before we sign off here? Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
No, look, I think, everyone likes to do these predictions for the following year, right? And I think my predictions are that, no surprises here. We're going to see a very big year for paddle in America. Very big. We're going to see the first Premier Paddle event. We already see a Hexagon Cup team from the US. We're going to see a lot more clubs fill state by state. We're going to see a lot more attention in the media on paddle. So paddle in the US, watch this space. It is a big year, 2025. I think start to look at Asia from a kind of prediction point of view, start to see some of the markets in Asia outside of Indonesia, where it's already quite developed. What's going to happen in Singapore, Hong Kong, India. That's the one to watch in my view outside the US for paddle. I think they're about to make a big play for paddle investment, for court builds, and it's going to become a fanatical sport there. So I think looking at some of these emerging territories is going to be fascinating. From my business point of view, like I said, I think it's about continuing to do what we do well, give great attention to our clients, start to work in some of these new territories, and the other projects, continue to build them and make sure they have a good place in the market. So there's some really exciting times to happen for paddle, and I think we continue to see the growth of the sport go from strength to strength.
Yeah, definitely. And I love what you're doing in the field. And we mentioned how busy you are. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
That's an absolute pleasure, Marcus, as always.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.